Welcome to another episode of Loki Sucks Dick. This is episode 2, based on episode 2 of Loki, called The Variant. Now, we already have one episode out. You don't need to have seen that to follow this series.
If you didn't watch that episode, we did cover some really interesting topics. In our filmmaking section, we discussed the twin character arcs of Thor and Loki. In our big queer theme section, we discussed the concept of religious persecution and how it often applies to people in the queer community. And in our queer iconic figures in history segment, we discussed Heleno de Céspedes.
Make sure to subscribe and give us a like on this video. Turn on notifications if you could as well. We're a growing channel. We love making this series for you, and we love watching Loki with you. Yep. You can also support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/MontresorMedia. For $1, you get access to our entire library of podcasts, as well as extended episodes of all of those shows, plus this show.
Yep, and our special podcast, So What Else, where we discuss random topics of whatever's going else.
And it's totally unscripted, and that's what makes it fun.
It is. So what about you, Seth? What did you think about episode 2?
You know, I had a pretty good time with this one. I think the crime procedural aspect, I wasn't expecting it to be so front-facing, and I mean, we get desk work, we get crime scenes, we get people pontificating around crime scenes. I was like, it felt like Law and Order Loki. I was kind of digging it.
And not in a bad way either. I love how they didn't make it feel like stale or overdone or retread.
It almost felt like they were like not parodying, but like almost doing a parody. Like it felt like there was a wink and a nod kind of thing of like, you know what this setup looks like on TV, so we're just gonna run with that and hope it doesn't, shine through too much. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the ways that they make sure that it doesn't shine through too much is just by they never put it too much in your face. They never bring too much attention to the fact that that's what they are doing. And I think they trust the audience to actually be hyper intelligent, which I love. I mean, I don't want to bring up the retread meme of, you must be really smart to understand Rick and Morty, but there's some shared crew between Rick and Morty and Loki, so
probably I mean, I'm a big fan of Rick and Morty.
There's definitely no. There are writers that are from Rick and Morty that are working on Loki.
I
don't know if it's writers specifically, but I know that there are important people in the show running staff that worked on Rick and Morty episodes. I believe it's writers.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I know there's been a lot of crossover between a lot of like fun TV shows from the early aughts, like Community. The two directors from Community went on to do a bunch of the Avengers movies and Captain America movies, and then Dan Harmon, who was a writer on Community, then I think he did some work on Doctor Strange for some of it, and so it makes sense. There's a lot of shared blood there. That's kind of cool, though.
Yep. And obviously the parallels between Gravity Falls and Rick and Morty, notwithstanding.
Yes.
So yes. I would love to see some Mabel and Dipper references in there somewhere.
Oh man, if one of the TVA portals opened and a mug and pen fell out of it, that'd be it. I'd be done.
Or like Dipper's hat.
Yes.
Or a six-fingered person or six-fingered person. Something Uncle Stan related. Anything I would whore myself out for. Not gonna lie.
I know J.K. Simmons is technically back in the MCU, but since he did the voice of Uncle Stan, the other uncle. Oh, who was the one that was trapped in the portal in Gravity Falls? Fuck. I'll drop the name in right here. That character, J.K. Simmons did his voice, and to have him show up and do a 6-figure cameo would be awesome.
I would be down with that. 100% down with that.
So what did you think of the episode? What was your takeaway?
I loved most of the things about the episode. Renaissance Festival in the 80s? Sign me up. Yes, I'm there. That's my vibe. I loved a lot of the character interactions. I loved basically any time you had two characters talking to each other on screen. What I didn't like was the pacing of the end in comparison to the pacing of things at the beginning. I felt like I wanted another Loki and Mobius scene that I didn't get, that would have made the final betrayal, or what they perceive to be as a betrayal, that would make that hit harder. And what they did instead was just long extended, oh, we need to show the magnitude of all of these places and scenarios and things. Like, you see Asgard, and you see what's the planet from Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and you see a bunch of different places where shit's going to hell. And but I didn't want it. I just want to be like, okay, let's see the character, where are the characters? Where I care about the characters and their reactions, and I get it. They're going to be next week. But because you're not giving me something more like that at the end, I would have liked an after credit scene or something like that. But because you didn't give me something like that at the end, it makes me want it more at the beginning or at the period right before they go on a mission. Because they did some really good character development work between Mobius and Loki, and I think they're going to throw it away real fast. They have given all signs of throwing it away real fast. And that, here's the thing, I watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine a lot, so there was the whole changeling thing, and who is who, and who's, actually a changeling, and I've seen this mechanic of, people who switch places, or people who are different versions of one another, and because of it, there's either mistaken identity, or there's trust issues, or both. And I'm hoping that they don't bore me with trite stuff like that. And I have a fear that they might do that. And I really hope that if they do, they don't make it suck.
Yeah. I follow what you mean. I think the only holdout that I have right now is this show seems intent to keep turning things on its head.
Yeah.
And I think it would be apt for them in the next episode to have Loki get picked up by the TVA again rather quickly, just to keep the audience and Loki on our toes about how powerful are they? Is Loki going to be on the run for the next 4 episodes? How are things going to pace out that way? Because I want Loki to have to go back to work, I guess is what I want to say.
I'm you just gave me all of these great Loki and Mobius character interactions, and it's only 6 episodes, and you are giving us this huge plot. I don't think that they're going to reveal a tremendous amount about the TVA in the first season. They've already said that they're going to do additional seasons, but they've already opened so many big cans of worms that I really fear they're going to forget about the little cans of worms, like our dear friend Casey. Which brings me to a really important question. Did we get enough Casey this episode?
No, we did not get enough Casey. This is going to be a recurring segment. Did we get enough Casey? And in the first episode, I would say we got just enough that I'm on board. But man, we didn't even get a full face. We just got his profile. We just got this much Casey.
Here's the thing. Let me take you back to writer school. There's this thing that's called the bite, the snack, the meal. When you give your audience something initially, you give them a little bite, just a little taste, not the whole thing, just to whet their appetite. And then, when they're like, oh shit, that bite was good, the next time you come out, you bring that snack, and you're like, hey, what about the snack size version of that? And you're like, well, I mean, snacks are good and all, but, I mean, fun size isn't really fun,
Right.
Bring me the meal, give me the whole full course meal. And I got a bite, and then I got an aroma whiff, and I felt cock teased. I did not appreciate it.
This was the Casey flavored LaCroix of Casey appearances in the show. I really hope they don't let us down in future segments, because this could get sadder and sadder. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
we're here for Casey. Hashtag Stan Casey.
I'm thinking that Casey is going to be more than just a throwaway character. I mean, but here's the thing. The bonkers thing is, the interviews of the writers are basically, yes, there are a ton of Easter eggs, and some of them relate to the plot, and some of them are just Marvel Easter eggs. And I think a good example of that is the floor that Loki was doing research on. Was a basement sublevel, which that whole visual metaphor of going down the elevator, that's meaningful.
Beautiful.
Was on floor 372, and issue 372 of the comic book Thor involved the TVA and Thor, and interestingly enough, Jane Foster. So I'm wondering, because we've already noted the parallels between the Thor and Loki characters, if they're going to kind of do a similar thing with this. And to get in, I just want to do a teeny tiny bit of theory crafting. I don't think Lady Loki is Lady Loki.
Interesting.
With an asterisk. So in the credits on the non-English versions, the actress that did the dubbing for that character was accredited as Sylvie. And the only Sylvie in lore that's of any like noteworthiness is Enchantress. Now, when Loki gets his female form in the comic books, I think Loki, I don't remember how, Loki doesn't have a body for a while, and then a body is created that is supposed to be Sif's body, and Loki steals that body, and that's Lady Loki. So I'm wondering if they are either, if they're going to do it Enchantress's body it instead of Sif's body it, just to not have to bring Sif back in, or not have to, like, dread that with that character or whatever. But it's interesting that they chose to do that. Again, it could be just something that they're trying to throw people off with, but tons of Easter eggs, and I love that for shows like this.
Absolutely. Same. Something you and I both noted was one of the TVA folders gets turned upside down when Loki's doing research, and it looks mysteriously like Val.
That
upside
T,
down.
That T is very one-sided in a way that makes it reflect into an L. The important Val being Lady, I'm going to get her name wrong. I think it's Lady Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, but it might be Valentine Allegra de Fontaine. Don't call me out.
Sure. Which we know from the last episode of Captain and the Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I want to get the changed name, because they're going to change the name of that series too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Which I'm fine with. Like, every series doesn't have to have the same name season to season. I
think that's actually what they're getting at with WandaVision, where they say there will never be a season 2 of WandaVision. I think it's going to be called, like, Wanda and Vision, or Vision and Wanda, or something like that, to infer that the change in their power dynamic has gone through. That would be the smart play that I would do. But she's the godmother of spies, I believe is her title. And she is heavily affiliated with Black Widow. So I have a sneaking suspicion that if they're not actively putting her in Loki, they are just referencing her to kind of get the hype up in advance of that movie.
Totally.
She would be a weird fit as, like, a big bad boss. I don't think that would fit, but it would be. I could see her as a one episode character, since she's spies and espionage and all that jazz. She fits thematically.
I could totally see it. In this next segment, we're going to talk about one of my favorite aspects of my life, which is filmmaking. I'm very excited to break this one down. So last week we went into character arcs, which is kind of more on the writing side. Now, obviously that gets brought out through filmmaking. There's really neat ways that you can parallel things visually without using words, and I will be bringing up writing in the future. However, I really wanted to get into a specific aspect of filmmaking that, as soon as I point it out, it's going to be yellow punch buggy. You're going to see it everywhere. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain why you're going to see it everywhere. So the thing I would like to talk about today is the 3-camera setup, or how to shoot a dialogue scene. So I have a few screen grabs that I'll be throwing up on screen through this segment to show you what I mean, but there is, within filmmaking, ways to do things efficiently. And one of those ways is to set up 3 different cameras, capturing 3 different kinds of image and stitching them together into what's called a dialogue scene, which is characters sitting around and talking. In this episode, there are 3 of these scenes in particular that I'd like to highlight for specifically how they're constructed and what those constructions mean. So the first one that I'd like to highlight is the dialogue scene between Ravonna and Mobius. Now, there's more than 3 kinds of shot in this scene. That's typically called coverage, where you shoot a bunch of different angles. But in particular, I'm going to throw up the ones that I'm talking about, and this is going to make up the majority of this scene. And we start with a wide shot of the entire room with both Ravonna and Mobius on each side of the screen. Mm-hmm. The purpose of this is not only to establish what the layout of the scene looks like, what the distance between the characters is, but it also establishes things about our characters. We see that they're facing each other, so they're in some kind of opposition to each other. And when we switch over to what I'm going to call shots A and shot B, shot A is going to be Ravonna, and shot B is Mobius. Shot A's on Ravonna are shot in a way that her eye line points just a little bit down. Instead of directly across the screen, she looks a little bit down. And then we shoot Mobius from a little bit of a lower angle with his eye line going just a fraction up. So A, we're seeing their eye lines meet. And what we're seeing here is an imbalance in power. Ravonna has all the power in the scene because she's Mobius's boss. And Mobius is appealing to her to get the stuff that he needs to continue with the story. The reason for shooting this is to kind of employ things without actually saying them. He never has to say, well, you're my boss, although he might, but the scene is dictating that to us.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting visuals in that first shot, especially because they're seated pretty far apart from each other. And it's interesting their positioning in the frame because in natural position, the two of them would be equally spaced. So there would be like a certain amount of space, Ravonna, a certain amount of space, Mobius, and then an equal amount of space between like edge of frame and Mobius and edge of frame and Ravonna.
Yeah.
But because she is tucked in, she's closer to the center of the frame, and he's almost retreating off the side of his frame. So that kind of gives the impression that she's on the attack and that she is kind of more aggressive in the conversation and he is more reluctant. He doesn't want to be in the conversation as much. He has more to lose. It almost kind of gives him a cowed appearance as well. And exactly. I love that. And I love how there's just this gulf of white light that almost reminds me of the Star Trek transporter room in between them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
that was a great shot. The color choice for those shots is fascinating too because it's so muddy and brown and indistinct, and those characters' motivations are very muddied and indistinct. Like we don't really know who they are. We know because the camera is below them and we're looking up at them. We know that they're powerful characters and that we're supposed to recognize that. But we don't, as the audience, know the purity of their intentions. And this show has kind of made it like, is the TVA really the good guy? Because it's kind of like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory, if you ask me.
Yeah, definitely. The overall look is so ominous and put together and nebulous. Yeah. And that's kind of all we know about Ravonna and Mobius at this point. It's kind of... we can tell they're well put together, but they are ominous and nebulous. And the one thing that comes out of that scene that may get brought up in a future episode, but no promises, because I don't know how this show's going to go. But something I noticed was that there's a line of dialogue between them. Ravonna points out that Mobius is similar to Loki, but then Mobius points out that Ravonna is similar to Loki.
Yes.
And now we're getting an idea of... hey, maybe a lot of these characters are going to align with each other at a certain point within the series.
That's my hope. This really feels like the Island of Misfit Toys to a degree.
Yeah.
I really hope that they end up on the same side against the TVA, because a more interesting plot to me is Loki gets some of those people on his side and then like does whatever, then Loki does it on his own. I think part of his failure as a character, one of his weaknesses as a character, has been how independent he has been, how he doesn't generally like working as a group. He just wants to be on top of the hierarchy. That's not a great way to succeed in life. It's very, very challenging. And I think it's a better story if Loki makes good relationships with these characters, even if his intentions are still horrible, even if he's still the bad guy. It is way more interesting if he gets some of the quote-unquote good guys on his side first.
Exactly. 100%. Or even if there are no good guys. I think that's a line towards the end of it. I've noticed that they're not all good guys are all good. I love that line because I feel like it puts everybody in kind of a nebulous light in this series. Those are great observations. The second dialogue scene I'd like to highlight is between Loki and Mobius. This is during their conversation in the I guess snack bar area.
Yeah.
I was split between the one where he's delivering the metaphor and the one later on where they're kind of discussing free will and things like that.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't highlight that one, however, you still could use a lot of the same applications here, is I think the way that the snack bar scene was shot, and if I'm being honest, Casey's in that scene. That was the winning part for me. So here we are.
There's also in the one screenshot, there's somebody that looks off to the side. There's this chick that keeps being in the background of frames, and she looks a lot like Peggy Carter, and I am not the only person who has noticed that.
Yeah, the murky figure that was shushing Loki in the library too. That was another one where we never see their face. Like, who are they?
I have a feeling that's somebody, because the thing is there is nothing on this show that is a line of dialogue that exists for no reason.
Right.
Everything that is said for a reason, and they would just have the librarian shush Loki if they didn't have any purpose. I think it's probably going to be like an in-joke or a reference later and not like a major plot point, but I'm really curious to see who that shusher was.
Oh, totally. Let's highlight that if it pops back up.
Mm-hmm.
So in this dialogue scene, it's presented very differently from the first one. Very specifically, you'll notice in the wide shot, hey, look, there's Casey off to the left there. But overall, you can see that the spacing and the eye line between Loki and Mobius is even. They're essentially equals at this point. Their dialogue has not informed us of that at all going on so far. It really feels like Mobius has been on top.
The dialogue has inferred the opposite. The dialogue consistently, every single TVA person that speaks to Loki, with the exception of maybe Casey, makes derogatory terms towards Loki being like a failure and worthless and not being good at anything and really only just existing, you know, in the hopes of a lark that he might be beneficial for this investigation.
Yeah, exactly. And inversely, Loki takes every opportunity to call himself the superior, the better one. He has to make up for all these people putting him down. And that's why the visual indicators of power, like things like how shots are set up, are so important, because it can be because that sets a different thing in your subconscious than the dialogue is setting in your conscious, and that it changes the way you view a character, and it makes certain pivots that a character does later seem more predictable. Or like, you know how sometimes a character does something in a TV show and you're like, wait a minute, those characters aren't equal. Like, they've never inferred that that character had any power at all. Yeah,
that's when you don't do stuff like set up shots like this. That's where those things come out of. When you set up your shots properly, when you foreshadow in your dialogue, then you don't have those like weird situations where people don't understand your plot twists. And that's why shows like Loki work, because they pay attention to these details.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Something I'd like to highlight in this is, if I'll throw up the A shot and the B shot at the same time. These are mirrors of each other.
Yep.
And that is maybe metaphorical to Mobius being the chaotic good to Loki's chaotic neutral to chaotic evil, depending on where he feels at the time. So it could be implying that. It's definitely implying that they're on equal footing, or at least on the same side, which might be low-key spoilers for episode 3, because we know episode 2 ends with a betrayal. But our camera is informing us that these guys are on the same side, equal to opposite of each other. So maybe this is informing us subconsciously of stuff that's going to come on later. I also really love the soft green lighting in any scene where Loki's being the most himself.
Yes.
The beautifully shot. All the darks are super dark. The lamps have this like mushroom glow to them. The whole scene has like a little green filter on it. It's really pleasant to look at. As someone who's colorblind to everything but the green spectrum, any green shots, I'm just like, give me more, please.
I can definitely see that. Another interesting thing about that shot is circling back to our conversation about visual metaphors.
Yeah.
Josta Cola. The first time we see Josta Cola, which was a real cola that was out until like 1999, for those of you who are fairly young. The first time I saw that, I'm like, is this show supposed to take place in 1999? Like, one of my theories about this show is that it's like a Y2K type related thing. Like, Y2K actually happened, and the world has been over ever since, and you're just living in Loki's imagination or something stupid like that. Anyway, but I noticed it because I'm like, I used to drink that when I was a kid. I haven't been able to get that since high school.
That's so funny. Yeah.
It's interesting because the first time you see the Josta Cola, it's the first scene where Loki and Mobius are really starting to, where Loki's starting to take things seriously because he's seen himself die. So he's actually being open and honest. It's almost like sharing a Josta instead of, breaking bread together. And then you see it again in episode 2 where he comes up to Mobius and he's like, hey, wait a minute, I think I figured this out, and does the whole salad metaphor. Yeah. And the reason that I like the visual metaphor of the salad, so that really brings attention to the whole cinema craft behind it, because Loki's not the only one who's using visual metaphors. The writers and the production staff, they are putting all of these visual metaphors on the frame, and they're encouraging fans to find them and the Easter eggs, and it's just so good. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. The final dialogue scene that I'd like to jump into is the final dialogue scene of this episode, and if it didn't give you chills. This isn't part of the dialogue scene, like how to build a dialogue scene. I just want to point out that having 4 different actors play the other version of Loki in one segment of your show, and all of them swinging for the fucking fences.
Yes. And it's not like you brought fucking Academy. It's like Anthony Hopkins came in and was like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking own shit. It's like just random actors. I didn't recognize any of them other than the actress who plays B-15. They were just randos, right?
yeah. I mean, from what I could tell, they all look like, pretty fresh actors. But I think my favorite one was Randy, only because his switch from helpful Costco worker or Roxatron, whatever it was, switching from that into evil variant Loki. Yeah. Oh, that just fantastic!
It was so satisfying.
What a great time. But that aside, getting into the way the dialogue scene is built, so starting with the wide shot, we can see this is the closest together of any of our characters have been for any dialogue scene. So we're seeing that if you're reaching out towards yourself in the mirror, you're getting closer to yourself. So that's kind of visually what's happening here.
And it looks virtually like a mirror shot.
Yeah, exactly. They're very much so mirroring each other's posture and body language and things like that. The lighting is only coming from those dingy fluorescent bulbs above them. The rest of the store is kind of shut down. We have the most green of all the filters is on the scene because it is all Loki all day in this scene. And then switching to the A and the B shots, what I really loved here was the way that Loki is lit versus the way that Randy or Lady Loki or whoever this character ends up being. I'm going to use Randy for now. Yeah, I like Randy. The way that the A and the B are set up here, our Loki is in the dark, and that's not a metaphor. He's literally in the dark in the shot. But it is a metaphor for him being in the dark as to what's going on, even though he thinks he knows what's going on and thinks he can change things. He really doesn't. And so we're seeing that. And then we flip over to Randy. Randy is bathed in light. Randy knows everything that is happening. Randy knows what the end of this series looks like. Dude, Randy's just killing it. And so I love when you flip back and forth between them, we're getting an actual literal mirror, as it is another Loki that Loki's looking at, or assumably so. Yeah. But we're also visually being informed that these are two very, very different Lokis, even more different than Loki is from Mobius in the previous dialogue scene.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because that Loki hiding in the apocalypse. So there's a couple of really interesting things. I want to circle back to something you said about the whole, we assume I want to circle back to the fact that you had said about Loki being in the dark. I believe, though I would really actually need to write down the definitions and rules lawyer it, I believe at the very beginning, when Loki describes the two different types of, what is it? There's like duplication and there's splitting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Illusion casting and duplication.
I believe that what this other character, whoever is displaying, we'll call it Lady Loki for now. I believe what Lady Loki is displaying is actually not within the rules of either of those. And I think that's why Loki is so confused.
Yeah. In that scene where he demonstrates the difference between illusions and duplicates, Mobius doesn't get to finish his sentence of his favorite of the three powers.
Yeah.
He gets cut off by Loki, so maybe there's another power we don't know about that maybe Loki doesn't even know about.
Yes, and that goes back to something that I briefly mentioned in episode 1, where Loki is very underpowered in the MCU. That is something that has been brought up time and time again, and that's kind of why I'm thinking that they might go the direction of, like, Loki stole Sith/Enchantress/ whoever's body. That's Lady Loki. And
sure.
After whatever shenanigans, because in the comic books, Loki overcoming Lady Loki's struggles, I don't remember what they were because it's been a while since I've read the book, but when he got through that character arc, he got lots more powerful. And then he went on to become things like Sorcerer Supreme and stuff like that. So it would be interesting. I think the best way to acknowledge that his character has been underpowered and power him up is to you defeat yourself. That's a great metaphor. Yeah. It's a great story. So I'm hoping that that's kind of one of the directions that they're going, that there are Loki powers that Loki just hasn't been aware of because this version of Loki wasn't exposed to a certain thing that happened or what have you.
Do you remember ghost mode in the old Mario Kart games where you could race yourself?
Yeah, I hated that.
Well, I think it's like a very apt for what Loki's going through. Loki is literally racing the faster ghost of himself to the end of whatever the series is and wherever it goes from here. I as you were saying it, that's what popped into my head was like, oh yeah, it's like Loki's in ghost mode.
Yeah, Loki had one super solid run on Mario Kart when he just performed way above par. Right. Or, I guess way under par, whatever. He did real well, and now he can never retrieve that glory again. Love that metaphor.
There's I don't know if it was a true story or not. It's one of those like copy paste stories that I read one time about this kid who's basically he grew up playing Mario Kart with his dad, and his dad would save the ghost time trials, and his dad passed away, and years later he dug out. That. Yeah. Years later he digs out the Nintendo 64, plugs it in, and finds his dad's run still saved on it, and so he intentionally won't beat his dad's ghost just so that it stays on the cartridge. It's like it's kind of spooky, kind of funny, kind of sad, kind of heartwarming. It was one of those just like it hits all the little emotional buttons.
Yeah, I could see myself becoming very neurotic about something like that and wanting to preserve it at all costs.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, a part of my heart seizes because I'm like, that console isn't going to work forever, that cartridge isn't going to work forever, that battery's going to die.
There's got to be a way to like copy the information off those cartridges, though.
Yeah, there's got to be something. I would have to find something, or I would have to like record it or something. I'm very sentimental about weird stuff like that. It's nothing like normal, but yes, very weird things I get sentimental about. I could totally see myself overreacting about something like that.
I feel that.
So we've kind of been hitting at it. I think let's go into our next big queer theme, which is other people villainizing you, making you the villain, casting you as the villain, which is, I mean, obviously, Loki cast kind of by Marvel as the villain, as a gender fluid character. There's obviously that reference, but everyone villainizes Loki in their own minds, even Mobius, who is the most understanding, I think, of the characters in their reactions and responses to Loki, is very demeaning. Like, they're real quick. In that episode, B-15, Ravonna, Mobius, Lady Loki / Sylvie / whoever, a couple of the other like people that are Loki, like Randy and whatever, all talking down to Loki. Loki is really the only character that ever says much positive about himself, you know?
Yeah. I think I'm trying to think. Somebody pays him a compliment at some point, and he's like taken off guard by it.
Yeah.
That might have been in the first episode, or I might be misremembering. But yeah, I agree. He's the only one sticking up for himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and the whole scared little boy metaphor, I think particularly for queer people that have had to be like in the closet or closeted for any period of time in their life, there is that element of our own personality that is like us when we were a kid, and like the desire to protect and nurture that inner person. And when you see that in another person, when you see somebody else and you can tell that they've been through the same things, that like your same struggles. I have a saying, it's called like the abyss in me reaches out to the abyss in you. And what I mean by that is, you know, because I've been through certain like traumatic things in my life, when I see that other people have gone through it, I really want to protect them. I really want to help prevent them from needing to go through the same things that I went through. So Ravonna and Mobius, I don't remember who says this, but they say that Loki is insubordinate, stubborn, and unpredictable. I think Ravonna says that, and Mobius says so are you, or vice versa. I don't remember what the exact
the I brought that up in the filmmaking segment. Yeah,
exactly.
That section.
So that whole segment, it really feels like they both have gone through a growing and development process with obviously Ravonna like badassing it. So I think that there is definitely parts of them. I think Mobius feels bad for Loki's inner child, whereas Ravonna kind of, you know, some people are softened when they have struggles. They don't want other people to go through their struggles. Other people are hardened by their struggles, and like they're like, well, I had to pay $100,000 for my college tuition. Why should these kids get to go to college for free? Ravonna strikes me as being that type of person. Yeah,
definitely. Like, I want to see you work for it to show that we're on equal footing.
Exactly.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, you need to prove yourself, like things like that. And it also kind of reminds me of like working in an office when you have like any type of neurodivergency, like if you got ADHD, autism, and things like that, where like you don't feel like you're on the same communications field with the people that you're working for. You may feel like they treat you like you're stupid, like you're less than, because they don't recognize your true value. They don't recognize that, yes, the things that make you different might make you poorer at some tasks, but they also make you better at some tasks. Yeah. And I found that very relatable too. Like the whole work part for Loki, like actually like trying to adjust to that like office communication stuff. I felt that in a deep part of my soul.
Yeah. He's having a hard time adjusting because and he even points this out in the episode, everyone at the TVA was made to be at the TVA.
Yeah.
That is like, what is my purpose? You pass butter. You know, like that's what they are. And Loki is so ostensively against that. And not only that, but being affiliated into that. I think he might be more afraid of being stuck in the TVA than running away from them.
I think he might be more afraid of being stuck in the TVA than just being obliterated. And I think only that the idea that he has that he will succeed at this is keeping him going at this point, which I love that. I love seeing Loki have to think and act and adapt on his feet, seeing different facets of Loki as, you know, he'll start out being like suave and charm and debonair, and then like after Mobius gets out of Ravonna's office, you can tell he's anxious. He's trying to prove his worth.
Yeah.
And you know, a part of it's probably a little bit of an act, but the act is definitely founded in reality and his own worries. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is the whole existence is chaos versus the end of existence is order.
Yeah.
Queer people in conformity. Not really things that go together.
No. It's almost like there's a reason for that. It's almost like if the general masses reject a group of people based on something that, I don't know, doesn't need to be based on, they congregate towards the things that are on the fringe. That makes sense to me.
I think once you start questioning, something, especially something that you've been told is true your whole life, like, you are a heterosexual female, and then you're like, what? No, I'm not. None of that's true. Then it makes you really start to look at, okay, well, does it matter if a boy wears a dress? No. Does it matter if a boy wears nail polish? No. Does it matter if a girl wears pants? No. Like, the more you start questioning things that you thought were true in your life, the more you realize just how many things in your life are social constructs and that you adhere to simply by virtue of not wanting to be judged. And once people are already judging you for being out and queer, you got really nowhere to lose. Like, sure, there is definitely a benefit to appearing heteronormative. I'm not going to lie. Passing has safety benefits. It makes your life easier in a lot of cases. But a lot of queer people are just like, fuck it. Like, if you're going to judge me because of my relationship or because of my gender identity, then I don't care what you think. I'm going to wear 16th century clothing and I'm going to start a YouTube channel and a podcast. You know, you don't care anymore what people think about what you do. And Loki is displaying that in spades. And I love how he keeps, how he was fixated on the jet ski thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that's like the one like weird quirk that he noticed in Mobius. And he's like, wait a minute, there's something about you that's weird, like in the good way weird.
Yeah. Well, and man, if that's not setting up some end of the season shot of Mobius jet skiing near some kind of apocalypse, because now we know it would be safe for him to do that. That's got to be his closing shot, right? Yeah. I mean, assuming he doesn't die.
Yeah, for real. I mean, this makes me wonder how many apocalypses there are.
Yeah, it feels like it should be easy to find one at any point throughout the galaxy, right? Because the TVA doesn't just do Earth.
Yeah. I think that we're gonna start seeing more planets. Most of the footage that we saw from the previews for the show have already occurred in the show. I don't remember much, if any, footage that I saw in the like trailers that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, there's a couple like spacey Doctor Who looking locations we haven't seen yet, and then the vote for Loki, his big horn shot. That's the one that I see all the time that we haven't seen yet. But yeah, I would say 85% of the trailers have been just these 2 episodes.
Yeah. And I think especially with the only 2 episodes that they gave reviewers were these 2. I think there's a big reason. I think we're going to see a hard shift. And I'm wondering if the show is even going to be a criminal procedural after that, or if they're going to completely switch formats. It's interesting. They could take this next couple of episodes a ton of different directions. And I hate the fact that I need to wait a week.
Yeah, I hope they keep circling back on the crime procedural. I'll put it that way. That is like such a fun wheelhouse to see these kinds of characters play around in. So do you feel comfortable sharing any kind of experiences where you've been villainized in some way for your queerness?
Yeah. I mean, just anytime I think that there's certain crowds of people that you just can't be open around. And there's always times when I'll open my big mouth and realize that I said something that I shouldn't. I fortunately have not been around a lot of the people in my family that are like that for years, but there were definitely some times when I was kind of trying to hint to like extended family members that I was queer. And like getting the whole, well, you know, if you're like that, then you're going to go to hell. And like, because in high school, I didn't know that I was bi yet. I didn't realize. But everybody thought I was a lesbian. So the nuns used to like talk to me about it. And Catholic nuns, and their ideas on homosexuality, not my best, not my favorites. And this was a solid 20 years ago. So, just being made to feel demonic. And there were so many like demonic parallels. Like we kind of went into this in the first episode with the whole religious themes, like with the whole Lucifer the Morning Star fall. Like it's, you know, do you want to, like, it's like God has given you all of these things and you want to turn away from God's light and heaven and all of these things just so you can, you know, go have sex with a girl, or you can call yourself gender fluid on the internet. And I'm like, dude, chill. There's literally nothing in the Bible that pertains to any of the things you are saying.
Well, and it's so funny, speaking of biblical stuff, Pan, the god, is brought up in the Bible. It's one of the few non-Christian, Judeo-Christian like deities that are brought up within the Bible. He's brought up in a context that is very sinful. Probably. But I always find it funny.
Was it Sodom and Gomorrah?
No, it's a New Testament reference. Okay. They go to. Some of the disciples go to some place. I think this is post Jesus' death. It might have been pre. I forget exactly. I haven't read my Bible in a little while. But they go to this temple, a temple of Pan, and it's a temple known for like orgies, essentially.
Sign me up.
If you go back through any non-Christian history, Pan's a cute little goat guy who's just into fucking. Like, that's his thing. And if you ever wondered why the devil is shown with horns and a tail and goat legs, well, it's because they just wholesale turned Pan's imagery into the devil. Yeah. In the Bible, that's not how they describe the devil at all. And so I find it really funny that like what would have basically been a queer icon for like Celtic and European pre imperial cultures, Pan would have just been known as like, oh yeah, that's the god that's all about orgies. And orgies back then were known for not being heterosexual, to put it lightly.
Truthful. Most orgies are not.
Yeah, it's like the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You can almost always skip like 1 or 2 steps back
6
from
Degrees of Kevin's Bacon.
Yeah.
I hate myself.
You can always skip like 1 or 2 steps back from some kind of homophobic act to the like very mundane and nice thing that it stemmed from that just got villainized, which is exactly what you're talking about here. Credit for research for this week's figure in queer history goes to Paresh Maharaj from the Busted Limes podcast. Freddie fucking Mercury. He was the lead singer of the band Queen from its inception in 1970 to his death in 1991. Born Farrokh Balsara to Parsi Indian parents in Zanzibar, he spent most of his childhood in India where he learned to play piano. Eventually, he and his family moved to England where he attended university, where he majored in graphic design and met Brian May. The rest is history. But because Loki investigates a TVA agent's kidnapping set in 1985, we're going to center this segment of queer history around that year. Shockingly enough, Queen actually did not come out with an album in 1985. However, Freddie did have his solo album, Mr. Bad Guy, drop that year, so look out, Billie Eilish. There was another bad guy in pop music. By far, one of the 2 biggest highlights of that year for Freddie and Queen was Live Aid. Queen was undergoing a gigantic backlash for the Sun City concert in which they accepted money from the apartheid government of South Africa to perform. Seeing as how that performance at Live Aid is now widely considered to be the greatest live performance of all time, it's safe to say they won back some goodwill. Another highlight of 1985 for Freddie was when he entered into a relationship with Jim Hutton, who would remain his husband for the rest of Freddie's life. As one story goes, a waitress in Spain tried to hit on Freddie and asked if he had a wife, to which Freddie responded by putting his hand on Jim's knee and saying, "This is my wife." Unfortunately, because this was the 80s, Jim would stand in the background whenever the press was near. It was at this point where Freddie kept his relationship secret from his parents, with a cover story of Jim being his gardener. However, Freddie would make his affections known in private. For Jim's birthday one year, he prepared an entire spread made of only potato dishes, because Jim was Irish. And that's something that could catch on in 2021 easily as like an idea for a party theme. I could see it. Freddie wore the bisexual label, but the way he talked about it, he made it seem like he was using it as a placeholder because he mentioned how he wasn't sure if there was a label that actually fit him. With hindsight, it may be easier for us to help find Freddie a label, but it might be more important to recognize the efforts and tribulations he went through, so we as a society could arrive at a place where we could have such a flourishing vernacular for gender and sexual identity not afforded to queer people in the 80s. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. What a great time talking about how to build a dialogue scene. Also, our big queer theme on being villainized was what a great in-depth discussion that we got there. Also, our queer figure of the week. Thank you for watching. This has been just a great fun time, if I could be transparent for a minute to you, YouTube. This has been just a really fun experiment for us. We've been having a really good time learning and growing from it. We would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe to the channel, give a like to this video, and also turn on notifications. I know you hear it on every video, but we're going to ask anyway, because you're, the chaotic good kind of person that would just do it on a whim, right? Yeah. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/MontresorMedia. Access is only $1. You get access to extended and early releases for all of our other podcasts that you'll see below. We also have a Patreon-only show called So What Else, which is just kind of a shooting the shit kind of situation, as well as extended versions of this show. We cut out some stuff that you don't get to see here on YouTube.
Yes. And please be sure to follow us on all of our social media. We are newly on TikTok, so get our TikTok link down below. Follow us there. We're going to be posting some videos like clips from this and our other shows. Both Seth and I are on Twitter, and Montresor Media has a Twitter. All that information will be down below. So that just leaves us with the most important question, Seth. Did Loki suck dick?